because that makes everything faster, right? Usually. Hey, good news on the building. It's coming along. It's looking less like a construction zone, but they're also taking the scaffolding down. See that? It's coming down. It's totally weird for me to have a kid that's old enough that I walk up to meet him in downtown somewhere. Hey, what did you order yourself?
I had a little bit of money left over. I got a chai cappuccino.
Of course you did.
I almost forgot to say no whip, but I remembered.
Nice. Hey, beautiful lady. Mind if I get a ride to my car?
Sure. We went and got pumpkins and stuff. We're gonna carve them. I'm gonna carve some pie onto mine, like, you know, 3.141. And I said to the building manager, I said, it's called pumpkin pie.
Only Tyler. Really tired today, but I want to tell you guys a little story about my Twitter handle @AlSmith. You see, I got my Twitter handle in a unique way. Here's the backstory. A few years ago, I was doing a lot of photography, I was doing a lot of mentoring, I was doing some business consulting, and I decided that I needed to have my own branding. I talked to a friend of mine who did lots of logo stuff, and he's like, oh, I got an idea for you. He did me up my little AlSmith logo, which you guys have seen at the beginning of this stuff. And that's the logo that's on all my invoices for everything, and so it's kind of the personal brand I drive home. So I decided I also needed some assets to go along with that personal brand. The biggest challenge is my name is Alan Smith, Al Smith. Could you ask for a more common name in the entire world than Al Smith? Next to Bob, who was my dad, and John, who was my uncle. Go figure. You can't ask for a more generic name than Al Smith. You see, there were two assets I really wanted for my brand. One was a domain name, and the other was a Twitter handle, because at the time Twitter was a great way to communicate. Wow, I can't believe gas is 122.9 here right now. It's just gone up like crazy. My Jeep is super thirsty. I looked up online for my domain name and my Twitter handle to see what was available, and both of them were taken. Both alsmith.com and @AlSmith Twitter handle were both taken. At the time I was using @_AS, which was just ridiculous. I don't know what made me think of that name because no one could remember it. So when I looked at the Twitter account, it had 0 posts. No one had used it. It's been around for a long time, but no one had used it. It was non-existent, not a post, not a profile picture, not a write-up. There was nothing on the Twitter handle at all. Someone had just registered the name and never used it, which was really frustrating to me because as the guy with Al Smith, someone who registered Al Smith as a Twitter handle better use the dang thing because it's like gold. I contacted Twitter and asked them if they could give me this Twitter handle because it's clearly not being used, it's clearly of value, and the person wants nothing to do with it. They told me, no, we don't do that. We don't release domain names. We don't release Twitter handles. We never release Twitter handles, ever, 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 ever. And I was like, well, that really sucks. So now this Twitter handle was gonna sit there and never be used for what it was intended to be used for, which in my mind is a horrible thing for Twitter. I clearly had to message and stalk the person that owned that account in any possible way I could to get their attention. Searching for anywhere that Twitter handle was mentioned or used, and I did every investigatory kind of journalistic thing I could possibly think of to figure out who was behind that domain name. I just stumbled across the Twitter name associated to a Facebook account. Then I decided to just go after this Facebook page and try and message him to try and get hold of the person just in case that Facebook account was linked to the Twitter account. This went on for a year. Okay, let's go for a walk. I was relentless about it. I even had a calendar appointment scheduled for once a week. I just sent off a message instantly just to see what would happen. And eventually, after just over a year of trying, I got a message back. The Twitter handle was owned by a guy or controlled by a guy in Nigeria who was a fairly poor guy living in Nigeria who had planned to do a business degree when he could and then move to the US, and he was gonna change his name to Al Smith because it was a more common name. I couldn't even pronounce his name, I can tell you that right now. I asked him what I could give him in exchange for his Twitter handle, and he said the only thing he didn't have in his life was money. So I said, how much? He said 50 bucks. 50 bucks. To him, that 50 bucks was probably a lot of money, but to me I was like, wow, only 50 bucks? I was expecting more. I said, how about we make it 100? He was super happy. How am I gonna get this money to this guy in Nigeria? It turns out the only possible way I could get money to him was through Western Union. And if you know anything about Western Union, you know that there's no holds on it, there's no account settings, there's no nothing. I just have to send the money in trust. So I wired $100 Western Union to the Blue House something 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 in this little weird town. Literally no address, just the Blue House. And then I just waited. A month went by with no word from this guy whatsoever. And I started to think, I've lost my money. But then, all of a sudden, a month later, I got a Twitter message to the guy with the Twitter account and the password ready to log in and go. Needless to say, I immediately logged in, changed the password, and I've owned the account ever since. Turns out it took the guy a month to walk to the Western Union store to go and get his money. All of a sudden, one day, I was noticing that I was getting a lot of mentions from people I had no idea who they were. I was like, what is going on here? My Twitter handle trended into the top 10 on the Twitter page. I was so dumbfounded, I had no idea what was going on. Turns out there's a big, huge presidential dinner in the US called the Al Smith fundraising dinner. Everyone at the dinner was tweeting and tagging at Al Smith, thinking that was the Twitter handle for the dinner. And so my Twitter handle was rocketing. I started tweeting people back like, I don't know what's going on, what's happening. And so now ever since I've had my Twitter handle, whenever that dinner happens, I trend into a high percentage on Twitter, which just happened again when Trump and Hillary were at the Al Smith dinner. So there's the story of my Twitter handle. Make sure you subscribe me over there, follow me over there. I post very little, so you won't get interrupted by anything rude over there or anything, but just so you know, that's the story of my Twitter handle. I bought it from a guy in Nigeria for 100 bucks, and every year when the presidential candidates all speak at the Al Smith dinner, my Twitter handle trends into the top Twitter handles on Twitter.